All right, you are looking live at I don't know, the inside of our offices where we spend all day and don't talk to anyone and just gradually
Where
allow like the moss to creep up the walls.
where the magic happens. Here, let me turn on the lights.
Uh yeah, should we make some faces here?
Yeah.
Um your reaction when De'Aaron Fox his trade request ish became public. I never look at you during these, and I probably should honestly. These are okay. You want to do one?
Oh, your reaction to Jimmy Butler being suspended again.
I will say Dan wants us to like hold in place, so we can make a future thumbnail. All right, let's see. Your reaction when you saw the all of the trades that we made in the mock trade deadline. All right, let's do the show.
All right, rock and roll.
All right, welcome on everyone to our last Hollinger and Duncan before the trade deadline.
Dun
And
dun.
yeah, our next episode, by the way, will be for probably Friday, I would imagine, after the trade deadline, after John and I do all of our stuff and we let the dust settle a little bit. So I hope that you will join us there. And I also want to remind you to join us on Dunkdown Prime. That is where the next Hollinger and Duncan reacting to the trade deadline will be. That is where most of our trade deadline reaction with me and Danny Leroux will be. That is where the De'Aaron Fox mock trade that we are going to be referencing here took place, and most of the overall mock trade deadline took place as well. So we are having a great sale right now for those who are first time subscribers, 35% off the yearly price at Dunkdown Prime using the code mock deadline 25, and that of course has a link in the show notes. So let's begin though just with your general assessment over the last 48 hours or so of this De'Aaron Fox trade request ish with the Kings.
Well, it seems like it's a mutual realization. I mean, he's not going to extend his contract there, right? So then it becomes incumbent on the Kings to get value now rather than wait 18 months and see him walk as a free agent. Now, they could take this into the summer. How much are they really going to get out of Fox between now and the end of the year? The only argument is that you hang on to Fox. He plays so well that he makes one of the three All NBA teams, and then he feels like he has to extend because he can only get a supermax from the Kings. That would be the only argument for keeping him, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And like they had this terrible losing streak with Mike Brown. Then Braun gets fired. Then, of course, they bungle the firing from a PR standpoint, so where Fox is getting blamed and feels like he needs to push back and say that it wasn't his fault. Although, I mean,
Yeah.
it was to some degree because I don't know that Mike Brown's message was resonating with him anymore, whether he liked him or not. But they definitely played a little harder under Christie, but maybe that dead cat bounce is starting to wane as they're kind of staring down the barrel of a one-win Eastern Conference road trip right now after losing to Philly last night. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really hard to imagine, especially also because the voters have this crazy idea that Domantas Sabonis is more responsible for the Kings' success than De'Aaron Fox. And so he is regularly, I think, gotten more accolades than Fox has there, which is probably hurt the Kings, honestly. So I think the chances of Fox making an All NBA team are, I don't know, 5% or something when you consider both his component and the team's success. component, and also just that things seem to be going off the rails there in a general sense right now.
Yeah, I mean, if they're going to be a mid-table team, as they say in Europe, it's just going to be hard for him to make an All NBA squad. At his guys of his production level, typically don't make All NBA unless the team wins 50 games.
Yep. No, I think that's fair. And then also, maybe you could argue that some guys are going to get eliminated because for failing to hit the 65 game requirement, but there actually are not that many of those guys this year. I mean, Luka's in there, like that's going to open up a spot, but I think not enough to where you feel great about it. And also the fact that it's positionless too. I think maybe that makes it. I don't know.
Positionless might help him a little, actually.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of guards this year, but I don't think it's going to end up mattering either way.
So then there's like, maybe 24 hours of kind of obfuscation, like, oh, he has the destination. We don't know what the destination is. But then there's other reporting indicating it was San Antonio. Then the consensus, the reporting was that it was San Antonio. That was kind of out there to begin with. I mean, there's so many components to this that are fascinating between Fox, Rich Paul, the Spurs. How much do the Spurs want him? What's the leverage for the Kings? What's the leverage for San Antonio? How much do these other teams want him? Will they be dissuaded from trading for him? How does all of that add up in your mind in this situation?
There's a variable here that I think has to, at least you have to start thinking about, which is, when are the Spurs on the clock with Victor? And one of the things I think about is that their best opportunity with him is actually the last 2 years of his rookie deal, because with him being on such an unreasonably cheap deal for his production, it allows them to kind of have room for more quality than they otherwise would in the payroll scheme. And so I think I think they're a team that low key has to act sooner than later. And so this Fox thing is a real opportunity for them, because I just don't know how many guys they're going to be able to get in I mean, having Victor there is a great card, obviously, and their history of treating guys well is too, but you don't even know what the future there is in terms of who's running the team, right? So
yeah.
I just think if you have this opportunity, if you're San Antonio, I think you have to grab it. I mean, because the other thing is, it's very rare now for a player still in his 20s that is a star to make a request like this. We've seen it a lot with older veterans, such as with Jimmy Butler, obviously this year, but guys still in their prime who can line up with Victor's prime, more or less, that's a more rare thing.
Can the San Antonio Spurs win a championship with Victor Wembanyama as your best player and De'Aaron Fox as your second best player?
I think so. It would be more incumbent on Victor, probably. I mean, your model is the Denver Nuggets, right?
Yeah.
With Joker and Murray. You still need good role players around them and whatever. Like, they still have to get better all up and down the roster. But I think that's a good enough core where you can come into next year and say, yeah, we're a contender if we can get some, real legitimate starters at these other positions, which should be an easier part for them.
Huh. So you think they could be a contender as soon as next year?
I guess they have some work to do. Don't get me wrong. Like,
yeah,
it's not just get Fox and you're a contender. It's because they have other positional issues to work out, and they just need more. I think they need more stuff in other places, but they also have assets and flexibility to get it.
Yeah, I'm.
You sound skeptical.
I see what you're saying, and I made this point on the show yesterday because I was playing Rich Paul, where I was like, hey, San Antonio, because San Antonio was kind of hemming and hawing in the offer, and the Lakers had come in with an offer that was better than theirs. And I said, look, San Antonio, like, we set this up really well for you guys. Like, when is the last time that a guy with only a year and a half left on his contract became available? You mentioned the age, but also the closer you are to the expiration of your contract, the more you can control the process and say, I want to go here. And therefore, the less that team has to give up because there are fewer competing offers. You still have to overcome whatever internal leverage the Kings have to get to just keep them and go to the summer. But you would think that you're not going to get more from him in the summer necessarily because you get 2 playoffs instead of 1, although I don't even know. I mean, that's kind of the weird thing for the Spurs is like they're probably not going to make the playoffs this year, even if they do get Fox. Maybe they could make the play in. So, but I think so that getting a player of Fox's caliber, the price in terms of assets should be very low, right? This is not, I don't think, you can correct me if you disagree, I don't think this is a whole draft type of situation. It's an empty the cupboard situation like for a KD or a Mitchell and those are draft picks, not necessarily young players, and the Spurs have a lot of stuff. They're kind of going to be in a similar situation where the Knicks were in the Mitchell talks, where they're like, okay, we'd love to trade for Mitchell, but we also need to leave enough in the cupboard to trade for yet another star as well. As it turned out, they had Jalen Brunson, and not trading for Mitchell, it turned out great for New York. But that was the thinking at the time, and I think one that the Spurs would do well to heed. And so I certainly agree with you that there's a risk here that if you don't act now, that you'll never get a chance to trade for someone as good as Fox. Like, Fox is better, I would say, for them. I don't know. Maybe he's better for them than Trae Young. I'm not sure about that, actually, because I think Trae is going to age a little bit better. He fits better offensively with Victor, and Victor can kind of cover up for him on defense. Fox is your worst defender, though, is something that's pretty appealing, I would say. So, but I think, like, and again, I'm very much on the edge here. I certainly would investigate these talks. I'm kind of even more concerned about just like, all right, De'Aaron Fox is the guy. We're going to pay him a 4-year deal at 30% of the cap. And also, by the way, he was probably going to want us to renegotiate and extend him this offseason. That's part of why Fox was pushing for this, of course, so he can get the extension this offseason instead of having to wait until the middle of next year if he gets traded this offseason. It
almost becomes his supermax because he gets an additional $9 million or whatever next season, right?
Yeah. And that's going to be a fascinating inflection point here too, right? Because like if I'm the Spurs, I'm like, no, I don't want to give you $10 million, just give it to you. We'll give you your max extension, but like we'd like to use the mid-level. We'd like, let's sign some other players. Like like if you renegotiate and extend him, that's basically your entire offseason next year, other than the room exception. So you don't want to do that. You'd rather be able to stay over the cap, use the mid-level, make some trades like that. I think that would, so like that's,
because you want to give yourself the ability to get that third star. I mean, that is probably the biggest thing, that you want to give yourself enough flexibility to get that Siakam or Anunoby type player, whoever that is. Because they still need more, right? And they'll have expiring money next year that can be part of trades like that. Some of it might go out to get Fox, but I have a feeling Zach Collins might still be around, and some of these other guys, and they could be part of the next deal.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, they would be a little low on matching salary by that point. That wasn't attached to players that they like. Now, Harrison Barnes can't be part of this Kings deal because he just came over from the Kings. He could be part of the next deal.
He can, but Detroit has to be
going
involved.
To a third team. Yeah, going to a third team. So the other thing I would say too with the Spurs is they could have $58 million and even $80 million in cap space in the summer of 26, depending on whether they brought back Sohan or not.
Right.
And so there's an opportunity cost there. Like, you sign Fox to this deal, you're going to vaporize that. And then Fox, like this player type, paying him a 30% of the salary cap, max contract, 20th, 25th best player in the league, and also not a guy who's like known for his shooting. He's mostly reliant on his really good athleticism. So you're talking about De'Aaron Fox making 30% of the cap when Victor is in like year 5, year 6. I don't know if De'Aaron Fox, maybe, yeah.
It's going to end up being
Yeah.
an okay contract. It's not going to be a great contract. Yeah, I'm with you there.
But
it's going to be. It's going to look like
yeah.
Murray's deal, basically, right?
Yeah, and the worst part of that contract will match up with when Victor is most able to be really driving championship level of winning. So I'm now maybe Fox could be retraded again. It's just this is all, and we have no idea how the Spurs operate in this situation. They've never been a destination like this. Are they just going to say, yes, De'Aaron Fox, the star wants to come here? Awesome. We'll bend over backward, renegotiation and extension. Rich Paul will give you a 3+1 with a 15% trade kicker in the extension as well. And we're just so fucking happy to have you. Anyone would ever want to come to San Antonio? Or are they kind of like, we're in a pretty good position here. Like we don't want to foreclose what's behind door number 2.
Yeah.
But your position would be go get him unless the price is crazy.
That's where I am right now. I mean, you make some good points. I just don't know what's guaranteed about that. Other teams are pointing to that 26 year too, when there are some good players theoretically who will be available in free agency. Yeah, I mean, you're San Antonio. Are you going to win that one? I mean, I guess they did it with LaMarcus Aldridge, so there's
or even just to trade. But... Yeah, and you could also just trade for somebody else as well, right?
I guess part of my argument is this is the best somebody else. This is the best somebody else you're going to get a shot at.
All right, can I give you a controversial take here?
Okay.
I would rather trade for LaMelo Ball than De'Aaron Fox.
Spicy. And possibly
as the Spurs, not as a team, as another team, but like, he sucks on defense, but Victor can take care of that, and he can shoot it really well. Hopefully, he can fit into. He'll get a little more serious in their culture. He's a great passer, and I think now the injuries are a little bit of a concern. He's got another sprained ankle, but hopefully he'll be back from that soon. But but I just, if De'Aaron Fox were this level of player, but just a little bit better of a shooter, someone I thought was going to age a little bit better, like especially because some of your other prospects too, like Sohan and Kessler are probably your 2 best prospects at this point.
Yeah, and they're
neither
both
of them
shooters.
project to be plus shooters. Like Castle, even like you can't play Castle and Fox here. Like the whole idea of Castle being so great is that like he's someone you could give the ball to if everything kind of works out. So that doesn't work that well, Fox. Now we'll get into the topic of like who you actually want to trade for De'Aaron Fox, and I think Castle would be at the top of my list if the Kings really value him.
Yeah,
but rather than trading future picks, I would rather trade Castle. I think, especially if you could build like the whole thing around Castle, which was that was the position that Danny took. So, yeah, it wouldn't be the first time the Kings traded their star for a top 10 pick in a terrible draft. Hopefully, we won't find out that Castle is 36 already after they trade for him.
Oh man.
Yeah. So like my position is okay. I wouldn't like not consider doing it if the price is low enough. Sure, I'll go ahead and do it. And I also would just be interested to know, like, okay, are you really expecting this renegotiation extension, Rich Paul? Like, is that your position, or are you willing to like help us out here and help us continue to build the best team? We'll give you the extension, but you like forcing us to do the renegotiation as well. It's not that big in the grand scheme of things, but it's also kind of like it does sort of set a tone for what the relationship will be.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So what? I guess where should we go next year? I mean, this is one of the most fascinating trade situations I can remember in a long time because you
So
still have the
what do we think?
possibility of
What do we
other
think the
teams. Yeah.
Spurs? What do we think the Spurs offer should be?
Like, what would be my limit of just what I'd be willing to give up?
Yeah.
So no Vassell. I mean, I don't know if the Kings are like, yeah, we just like Vassell is like the number one guy that we want, and then
I
we
was
could
gonna
just
say I would
do
probably
like
be
Vassell
okay
in a first.
I'd probably be okay putting Vassell in the deal if it lowered the rest of my price.
Yeah. Uh,
Zach Collins
I
though is
mean,
untouchable.
yeah.
Hard line in the sand.
Yeah. Well, he's got a Noah trade clause. That's named after Joakim Noah's contract with the Knicks, where he can't be traded because of his contract. So yeah, I mean I think like because I don't Vassell is another one of these guys where he has this idea of being a 3-and-D player, but really like the number one thing that he wants to do is shoot a bunch of mid-rangers, which teams need some of that to be sure, but he's not really that great at the D or that great at the 3 aspect. And so you think of him as more of just this sort of like maybe a third scorer type, really more of a shooting guard defensively than a 3. If he could really guard the 3, then I think he'd be unbelievably valuable. I'm just,
Yeah.
again, we're talking about guys who we've never seen anything in the playoffs. He's 24 years old. He's had some injury issues. If the Kings really valued him, I would not just like totally rule out moving him. Like I think his contract is, just like fair for both sides. I don't think it's
Yeah.
people thought
I
that was
agree.
maybe going to be a steal right at the beginning. I think it's just like it is what it
Yeah.
is. Like I don't think he's never going to make an all-star team. You agree with that?
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So because I'm kind of like they're like, oh, how could you give up a 3-and-D guy? I'm like, well, number one, he's on like a properly paid contract, and number two, I'm just not sure that you don't end up needing someone better than Devin Vassell in that position anyway, if you're really trying to get somewhere. Because that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
This isn't about getting to the 5 seed. This is about winning a championship with Victor Wembanyama in 3 years, 4 years. But I mean, it really comes down to just what is the leverage of the Kings, both internally and externally. Like, is Castle and a shittier first, is that enough? And then Keldon Johnson has to be in this too. He would help the Kings probably. Or maybe it is Barnes going to Detroit. But San Antonio would have to pay Detroit to take him.
Unless, like, if you were Detroit, would you just do Fontecchio for Barnes?
Well, you know how I feel about Simone Fontecchio.
Given that Tobias Harris isn't exactly lighting up the league, that was the thing I wondered about. Is if you would do that trade if you were Detroit, or if they just maybe threw you like a token second or something, or if you're waiting to do something splashier with that cap space.
Well, so the point of that would be then to just not have to send as much back to Sacramento.
Yeah, and if they valued Keldon Johnson, it would allow them to keep him.
I see. Yeah, I wonder what. I mean, that's another one of these guys for the Spurs. Like, yeah, he looked like he was going to shoot it really well, and now he's been coming off the bench the last couple of years on terrible teams. Like, he's still, have a nice game getting to the basket. Like, what is he as a playoff defender? Like, I tend towards the negative on a lot of those questions for the 25-year-old. I thought actually that was going to be a steal of a contract for San Antonio. It hasn't really worked out that way.
Yeah.
So, but he certainly is better than a lot of gentlemen that the Sacramento Kings have rolled out at the 4 over the years. I don't know if San Antonio can sell Sacramento on Zach Collins being an upgrade at backup center necessarily.
They're probably the only team in the league they could make that argument to.
Yeah. Yeah, but the Kings are going to want to get a point guard back. I
Yeah,
think it
because
really seems like it's going to come down to Castle.
the other thing. Part of this is that the the Kings are still trying to win. It seems like. So
Yes, which is
this
foolish.
isn't a reset / nuke situation for Sacramento. So what is the deal that leaves them in that position? And so they have to get something back at the point. All right, can I make a heretical proposal?
Absolutely.
San Antonio sends Atlanta their pick back from this year. Atlanta sends Trae Young to Sacramento. Sacramento sends De'Aaron Fox to San Antonio.
Oh man, you're
then
taking me back to
Phil-
1521. You're nailing the 95 thesis to the pole in front of the church right now. I can't even take it all in. Why does Atlanta want to get rid of Trae Young? Just because Jalen Johnson is out now, and then they can tank the rest of the season.
Yes, it would allow Atlanta to tank the rest of the season. Yeah, that would be the motivation for the Hawks.
God, Trae Young and Domantas Sabonis on the Kings with DeMar DeRozan and Malik Monk. Wow, it's an interesting one. It seems like I don't know. I have no idea what the hell the Hawks mindset is right now. That Jalen Johnson injury, I haven't had a chance to talk about that. That really
it's
sucks.
A killer. It's a killer. And
no, I knew it was going to be bad. You want to know how I knew it was going to be bad?
Because they didn't release any information for like a week.
Well, but here's how I know. I'm a little inside baseball here. My buddy Mark Spears, whenever he tweets something like retweets like a PR like, oh, Jalen Johnson with a left shoulder injury will not return. Mm-hmm. Whenever he retweets that, he's like the angel of death. That means like the guy is going to be out for this season. Like, because I would imagine, I mean, I haven't talked to him about it, but I would imagine that he has kind of heard something about like, oh, this might be bad. And so, but nobody's saying anything yet. So he'll just retweet like the team account saying like, oh, Jalen Johnson left shoulder will not return. And I'm like, why would Mark Spears be retweeting this? And then I found it's like in 90% of the cases, like the guy suffered like he's like out for the year.
I had no idea about this.
I've been joking that he's like the angel of death at this point. Like someone went out for a sprained ankle and he retweeted it. I'm like, he's gonna show up on the like he's gonna be listed as like out for the year with like trench foot after this. Like,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, and those of y'all making comments, by the way, thanks so much for those. We will get to those at some point. We got a bunch of good ones here, but we're just trying to make it through the show. We may end up just talking about Fox the entire time. Who knows? But yeah. So, and then the Spurs get Fox, and then the Hawks are just getting their own pick back. Are they getting more in that idea?
Well, because I just pulled this out of my butt 60 seconds ago, I hadn't really like filled in all the details, but that was like the headline for me, like those three pieces, and then negotiate everything else amongst yourselves. But those would be the three most crucial parts.
Yeah, the Hawks probably need to get more. I don't know how well the Hawks can tank either. Is Ricochet back? That'll help him. Help him lose some games.
Yeah, he is back, and sadly, I think your conclusion is correct. Yeah, I mean, they're just. I mean, if you take Young away, they're just never going to score a basket. I mean, they're 28th in offense when they play Young without Johnson. Like it was already a struggle. Like Trae offensively this year, it's been harder for him.
Yeah. No,
that was one of the reasons. If I'm Atlanta, I'm like, yeah, I'll listen. Now, the issue you run into if you're the Hawks or if you're the Kings is that Trae also can become a free agent in 26. And I think he's a clutch guy now, if I'm not mistaken. So that could get a little interesting there too.
Yeah, I'll double check on that in a second. So, but back to the Spurs Kings dynamic. The Spurs also have a 2031 swap with the Kings. that's the other thing that's hilarious. But is if you're Sacramento, it's like you almost can't, especially if your boss is Vivek Ranadive, you almost can't accept getting that back as one of the centerpieces of the trade. It's like it's too embarrassing. You just traded it like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Oh man. I mean, obviously, I think with this being the end of the Fox era, I think the Kings should be investigating the trade value of everyone on their roster. I don't know. Sabonis would be a fascinating one. But the Kings they're never going to do that. They're not going to do that with Vivek Ranadive. I've got Victor on my brain. I say Victor Ranadive some days, but they're just not going to do that. Which is kind of too bad, I would say. But because they have, like, this is one of those things where if they acted now, they could really be set up for the next era of Kings basketball and not be at a point where that 2031 swap wouldn't be that terrible.
And they would also keep their pick this year, which is top 12 protected to Atlanta.
Right. But, Vivek wants to light the beam. And so what's going to happen is they're going to be right around, they're just going to be in the, like, chase the 10 seed mode for the next 3 years. All these guys like Monk or Sabonis and DeRozan will lose their value. And then they'll be bottoming out, not by choice, 3 years from now, having accomplished nothing over the last 3. I mean, you go right, it'll just be, Bulls, Hornets. How does DeMar DeRozan always end up on these teams, by the way?
Well, the other fake trade I have in my head, if the Kings wanted to go this way, is if Jimmy Butler goes to Milwaukee and Chris Middleton is in the deal, then the Kings would try to get paid to do DeRozan for Middleton, so that DeRozan ends up in Miami.
Yeah, that's why I always thought that the Butler Kings thing made some sense. Now it doesn't, obviously. But
yeah, I thought Butler to Kings made the most sense before the Fox stuff happened.
Yeah. Not that we ever really heard a ton about that, but yeah. So say that deal one more time.
So basically, Jimmy goes to Milwaukee. It's Middleton and Connaughton and other stuff, basically, right? Middleton stops in Miami, has a cocktail, goes to Sacramento for DeRozan, and DeRozan ends up in Miami.
Yeah, and Sacramento gets paid for that.
Sacramento gets paid, obviously, for their trouble.
Yeah. Well, they kind of need DeRozan now, though. Like, they need a primary on-ball player.
Well, you're punting the season. I mean, that's the it's the thing they don't.
But they're not going to do that. They're just not. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I know what I would do. I would have a for sale sign outside of the Golden One Center right now, and we'll just take the beam and put it into storage for a few years, and break it back out the next time we're good. But yeah, it seems like that's not really going to happen.
Yeah, so the real question is, how do you fill in that point guard spot then if you're Sacramento? Because I don't think Trey Jones is the answer. I don't think Chris Paul is going to be in the trade. But is there a way to loop in a third team with a point guard you want? Can you get Anthony Simons out of this? Can you get probably too early for the Pelicans to sell on DeJounte Murray, right? But is there another kind of legit starting point guard that you can get to ride you through this era while you still get assets in a trade with Fox? Probably the best version of that would be Houston with Van Vliet.
Yeah, I mean, they would love it if Houston wanted to trade for them. And I actually was Houston in the mock that we did yesterday, and I wasn't really willing to offer that much. Basically, I was like, my thought was, I'm going to price enforce on San Antonio here. I don't want that. They're going to be our rival along with Oklahoma City for the next decade. So I don't want them to just get De'Aaron Fox for nothing. So yeah, if it was just Van Vliet and a bag of balls or something, like, no, I'm not. I would maybe make the deal, or at least like basically it's like almost like a fantasy auction where you just are like, yeah, we don't really want the guy.
Yeah.
We've got
Yeah.
Amen Thompson. We got all these guys who are like really emerging. Like, we don't want to fuck with that, but also like we don't want the Spurs to get De'Aaron Fox for nothing either. But I don't know. I honestly, if I'm Oklahoma City or I'm Houston or I'm Memphis, one of these teams to be competing with the Spurs, I would really, in the long term, I'd be like, okay, that's your move. This is your big move right here. Like, I'm not like, beside what could be behind door number 2, I'm not like that scared of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm terrified of Victor, but I'm just like if that's going to be Victor's, the best player that Victor Wembanyama is going to play with in this era, we can handle that.
Right. So then it comes down to price. Like, are you more worried about it if it only costs them, Castle and one of the other contracts and like one not great draft pick? So
Yeah.
they still have all their other stuff to go hunting with. Are you
No,
more
I
worried
think
than-
that's really what it comes down to at the Spurs. And obviously the Spurs could use some of these draft picks, and maybe that's how they get the third star. Is they will you agree with me that the San Antonio Spurs do not have that player in their pipeline right now? Like a guy that you see as a future all-star in their pipeline, or you believe that about Castle?
I do not believe that about Castle.
And you like Castle more than
I
just about
had him
anyone.
number 2 on my board,
right.
and he might end up justifying that. But I mean, this draft class is so bad that like you could end up number 2, and it's like great.
Yeah.
You had like Kentavious Caldwell Pope's career, and you were the second best player in the draft.
Yeah. I mean, I think
like one of those years.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I've talked a lot about Castle. I was having a conversation about him yesterday and disagreeing with someone who thought they were gonna be a lot better. But like, it's so we don't need to get into that whole thing either. But suffice to say, I think just with his like, I've been right more often than I've been wrong when I've assessed that guys who just absolutely cannot shoot to save their lives coming out of school aren't going to be a good enough shooter to be a superstar or an all-star. Like, I could end up being wrong. You never know on these, but
Yeah.
I mean, because it's not like his shooting has really gotten much better so far.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, he does shoot it well from the foul line. Like, I could be wrong. You never know on these things. Yeah, so I guess like the Lakers, I mean, I think the Lakers should be going pretty hard after De'Aaron.
So I was just about to bring this point up. I think the Lakers are the team that should be going balls out on this one. His max isn't that high right now, so you can actually get him. A lot of these guys that are kind of whispered for the Lakers, they make in the 40s or whatever, like Jimmy Butler's a perfect example. It's almost impossible for LA to get to the salary match. This one is not. So I think if you're serious about maxing out LeBron and AD, you have to put on the table the 29 and 31 unprotected. And, whatever the contracts are to get to the match on this, there's a couple different combinations that work. And it's just what's Sacramento willing to accept, and what still is a good offer, is what still gives the Lakers the best offer.
Well,
LA,
Reeves also is the thing. That's really the linchpin, because that like gives you Sacramento's need for a point guard. Although I kind of feel like I would be okay with just Monk and DeRozan the rest of the season, and we'll just take back the most assets we can get from San Antonio or whoever, and then we'll just deal with the point guard thing in the off season.
Right.
Like, that would be kind of my thought. I think you can get by with Monk and DeRozan, and maybe your defense gets a lot better with some wing players you get back from San Antonio or whatever. But yeah, I mean, for the Lakers, I actually started my offer with Reeves and a top 4 protected 2029 first. I eventually was willing to take the protection off of that, but I wasn't willing to go with the 2031 and the 2029 and Reeves.
Yeah. So if you're Sacramento,
But
then
maybe
is it
they even should do that. Yeah.
Hachimura, Vando, and Vincent? Let me ask you this: would you put Reeves in if you got Kevin Herter back, or does that not change anything?
What for LA?
Yeah,
No,
I
no.
think you could just make it work with Rui, Reeves, Vando, Vincent, and get Fox and Herter back. But I don't know if that's really
because Lakers are in the second apron, so or in the first apron, so they can't take back more than they send out. So they have to get over Fox's 34 million.
Yeah.
So I mean that's interesting. If they're like, should the Lakers just like the Lakers are just in a little bit different of a situation. Like what is that team with Fox, LeBron, and AD? Is that a championship contender? Where is that team in the West?
I'm. I still have a hard time saying quite championship contender. Uh, I think it's much more plausible that they could get to the second round, which I think that, I mean, the current version of their team is a play-in team.
Well, take me through the mindset of these teams that are not San Antonio when you're potentially like, it seems like it's sort of a soft no from Rich Paul. Like he hasn't quite said, "Oh, we wouldn't extend there," but maybe it's more like he wouldn't extend. He wouldn't say we won't extend, but he won't say we will extend if you trade for him. At certain these destinations.
Yeah, yeah. I think Houston, the thing is they have to pay so many other guys that I don't know if paying Fox is the number one thing on their table. I think if they're gonna pay somebody who isn't already on their team, it's going to be somebody who's first or second team All NBA type player.
Yeah, and someone who can shoot again. Like I that's the biggest thing about Fox. Like he kind of has to be it on the perimeter, and he's pretty good at that. But particularly as he ages, I don't know if he's like an absolute premium option there. And then off the ball, he's only okay. He does give you more defense at point guard than a lot of guys would if he's engaged. So there is that aspect to it. But again, like if you're, the fit of a Men Thompson and Fox, right, compared to like the fit of Fred VanVleet and Fox, and Fred VanVleet as this team option, they can probably decline that, get him back on a reasonable deal that will sort of be commensurate with it, where he'll be going into his 30s. He could also be matching salary going out. It's just like, if I'm a team with the incredible upside of San Antonio or Houston, I'm like, yeah, this will definitely make us better. But it just, like, these are teams that are in a position that few NBA teams have ever been in terms of their ability, how attractive they are, and how their ability to trade in terms of the assets. And I just, like, I would be shooting higher than Fox. You might not get it, but like, I want to trade for a player where as soon as we get this guy, it's boom, instant championship contender. Or you know what? Maybe we'll just use these draft picks and we'll get the guy that way instead. Like, that's not the end of the world. Like, I think if you go back to probably the two worst jobs of building around a generational superstar, obviously the LeBron Cleveland era is a classic there. And whether it was losing Boozer or then like immediately using up all your cap space on guys who weren't that good, and then just constantly throwing good money after bad and never, making it so Mo Williams ended up being the best player that LeBron played with in the first LeBron era. And then the AD Pelicans era was the same thing, because they just hit the accelerator too fast. De'Aaron Fox is better than anyone that the Pels traded for, or anyone that the Cavs traded for, obviously, but it still is a symptom of the same thing. I would say Fox was definitely better than Drew Holiday was considered to be at the time. Like, Drew was like a fake all-star in the East.
He was a fake all-star in the East. Yeah. I thought the other one you were going to mention, which I'm shocked you didn't mention, is KG in Minnesota.
Oh God. Yeah, well, I mean, they got fucked by the Joe Smith and and they had Marbury too, and then they traded for Terrell Brandon, who was awesome, and then he immediately got hurt. And that was that. Yeah, that is a classic. Who was the owner back then, by the way?
He may or may not own the team right now.
Yeah, literally may or may not. Yeah.
All right, can
We
I throw
really
a
don't know the
crazy
answer to
ass wild
that. Okay.
card into the Fox
Yeah.
sweepstakes? It would be a poll to get him to re-sign, but Detroit Pistons. Pair him with Cade, save the Kings some money. You could maybe do Jaden Ivey and one first, or I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here.
Like
But is that
I would do that as Detroit. I mean, again, you're worried that, yeah, I would totally make that kind of an offer but for all these teams, it's sort of like, yeah, you know what, we'll take a shot, see if he wants to re-sign or not, and if he doesn't, then it's not the end of the world, right? Like, Detroit is kind of limited in what they can send out for firsts, because they still have this pick that they owe now to the Wolves. But yeah, I mean, like, I think Orlando should be considering something as well. Like, there are a lot of teams that I think would at least sniff around. But
yeah,
it all depends on how
Orlando
hard.
should definitely be sniffing around this. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on how hard Rich Paul is really going to push for San Antonio, and how much does San Antonio want him back? Like clearly, like, if Rich Paul and the Spurs and Fox are all committed enough to get De'Aaron Fox onto the Spurs, it will happen.
Yeah.
But there are just all these variables that we discussed that are, so does it, so it really gets down to, like, what do the Spurs think of Wembanyama? Like, clearly, if Rich Paul is going to tell everyone else we're not going to re-sign, they're like, yeah, you could try to call Rich Paul's bluff. I would say if the price is low enough, you should do that. But once the Spurs throw in enough, the price gets high enough where it's like, no, we're not going to beat the Spurs offer when we don't think Fox necessarily wants to be here. So, like, it's all in San Antonio's court right now, I would say.
Yes. Let me throw one more nugget in there from the Detroit perspective. They would be able to do the renegotiate and extend with him.
The Detroit would? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's all. I feel like that's got to be a little overblown. Like, that's only $10 million on a contract to be like over $200 million. It seems like, like, if that's what they're really prioritizing, that's like, if that's why they want to go to San Antonio, that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But I mean, I think for Fox, looking at it from his perspective with, like, the Lakers, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe you go there. Like, I don't think De'Aaron Fox really is, like, that into the whole, like, LA, like, attention thing necessarily. Like, I don't know if that's what he's looking for. And, like, yeah, like, if you want to win, like, San Antonio is a better place to be than LA over the next 5 to 10 years.
Clearly.
Like, yeah, you might be pretty decent right now, but then you also are kind of like, you got to deal with all the LeBron stuff, and you're playing like third fiddle there for a little bit, and then maybe you're playing next to 34-year-old AD 2 years from now. Like, is that, like, that's, and then you're sort of like, maybe we get another free agent in to supplement. Like, it's you're not really securing your future. And, like, I completely understand why you'd want to go to San Antonio. Plus, he's from Texas. Let's see if we could hit a couple of these comments here while we're waiting, and then we could hit it. If there are another of the kind of interesting mock trade stuff we can get to. Dorian says, is Fox the first star to start a trend? Previously on the old CBA, you got paid, then you asked for the trade. Now with the new CBA, it's harder for that to happen. Is the move now to get to where you want first?
I don't know, because I mean, he got paid on the extension first.
Well, yeah, the rookie scale. I think he's talking about between the second and third contracts, right? Like, Bradley Beal got paid. I guess that was the third and fourth contract, but, like, he got paid and then he got out like a year later. So that's kind of what he's thinking about. I mean, I can react to that first, I guess. I think that when he's saying with the new CBA, it's harder for that to happen. He's talking about, Butler makes too much money, Levine makes too much money, getting to the matching salary. All these teams are, like, in the aprons and stuff. I think that is going to quell over the next 2 or 3 years as the cap rises. It'll be much easier to get business done. And it's also, the other problem is just that these guys are, like, bad contracts. Not even that you can't, like, you know, the Lakers are having trouble putting things together because they're in the first apron. But I think we've got 14 teams in the tax this year. That is just such a historical aberration for this time of year.
Yes.
And so we're gonna, in the future, like, deals will be a lot easier to get done. This is just kind of 2025, maybe 2026 is not a time that's going to be indicative of what it'll be like under the rest of the CBA, would be my opinion.
I agree with that because we're still working through some of these other deals that teams did just to beat the buzzer on this CBA. If you look at some of the stuff Boston and Phoenix did, especially, so it's sort of a one shot deal right now, and then things I think will settle down a little.
Jacob suggests the Thunder get involved for Fox. They can't really send back.
Do they need a point guard?
Yeah, he is a very similar game to Shea. I mean, Shea's kind of not like quite a point guard. They do need more creation. I just don't think for Oklahoma City that's the guy, particularly because you can't pay Fox 2 years from now. Like that's the biggest thing why I think Fox's value might actually be a little bit lower, because you're just looking at that next contract for 30% of the cap. Like they got to pay Jalen Williams the max, they got to pay Chet the max. They want to bring some supporting players around. Shea's being a super max. You can't fit in Fox on 30% of the salary cap going forward. Like, yeah, okay, if the price is so low that it's just like, fuck it, let's just get him on our team for the next year and a half and work it out later. Sure. Like, again, there's like maybe a price enforcement aspect there, but I think that I don't think that would make sense really for anyone. Oh God, this guy's like, if the Kings blow it up, what about Sabonis and Ellis for Draymond, Schroeder, Kuminga, and picks? Oh my God.
Wow.
But I'm not even gonna address that. I just Kamal says yeah.
No, Sabonis and Golden State. That would be like a dream for me.
I mean, offensively, it would probably work reasonably well, but obviously, you would have to move on from Draymond. Another guy. One of the things I was just like joking around about yesterday was like, what if Draymond got traded for Jordan Poole? Like, give the Warriors a second scorer that they need. Oh man,
I can't believe you just put that out into the universe.
So Kamal says if any team was going to not capitulate to Rich Paul and his strong arm negotiation strategy, would be the Spurs. And like, as I've been saying, I don't know if that's true. We've never seen the Spurs in this situation. Like, the best player the Spurs have ever traded for is probably Richard Jefferson.
Yeah, and then also remember they had this situation with Kawhi.
Well, on the opposite end, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So.
And they made a terrible trade that set them back a while until they just so happened to be perfectly positioned to tank in 2023. Like, they really got very lucky that I mean, obviously just in terms of the lottery odds that year, but
yeah,
because they should have just rebuilt with after Kawhi instead of trading for DeRozan. That was really weird. They got like 1-7 seed out of that.
Exactly. Picked up the extra year on Aldridge when they didn't have to. Yeah, that was just a weird time.
Let's see here. If the Kings want to compete, this is from Matthew, I wonder if Vassell, Keldon, Trey Jones, and a mediocre first would be enough. Yeah, that's just enough. Like, there's so many of these players on the Spurs, and with the Kings, like, what do they value? This, I can't wait to see what happens here, because like maybe Vassell would be enough. Maybe the Spurs like, Vassell's not that good. Sure, well, no, we're not going to. Oh, we'll put him in. Castle. Oh no, we're not going to. Oh, we'll put him in. All right, fine, but we're not giving you anything else. Oh God,
there are so many ways to put this together, and that's usually not the case. Usually, it's just like, well, it has to be these three guys and one of these two picks. And it's not that way at all with the way San Antonio's cap is set up. So that part does make it really interesting.
Yeah, and Matthew also makes a good point here that the key for the Spurs and why maybe they should feel better about getting Fox is it's your best way to actually get good now, which is worth something. I don't know if you're a championship contender with Fox, but you still have these picks from Minnesota. You've got
In Atlanta.
Atlanta.
Yeah.
You got these swaps that you can either trade for more, or you just can get more young guys in the pipeline that hopefully end up working out to be like your third star 5 years from now or something like that. Were there any sorry, excuse me. Were there any interesting trades in the mock trade deadline that you wanted to, that made you think of something, or that you thought were particularly realistic or unrealistic?
Well, you had the Chicago Bulls completing 3 trades.
Hey, everything is on the table for them. That's what the reporting says. Even the reporting out of Chicago, interestingly enough, which is usually more team biased.
I kind of like this Pelicans Pistons trade you did. CJ McCollum for Tobias Harris.
Huh.
Gives Detroit another ball handler, gets the Pelicans out of their tax situation. CJ's been playing better than Tobias lately. So that one to me is interesting. We'll see what the Pelicans do, because they might just do minor stuff to get under the tax line too. But that one, that was interesting to me.
Yeah, Danny proposed that. I took it as the Pelicans. I was like slightly regretting, because we had already traded Ingram as well in that circumstance,
right,
to the Bucks, interestingly enough. And so that was, but CJ for Harris only saves them $5 million for next year, and New Orleans had also gotten back Middleton, so I actually didn't get them quite as much savings as I really probably should have in those two deals. Well, yeah, so I guess that's the question. It's just like, do you think there's any chance that the Bulls will make guy like a Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu available? I mean, we traded everyone, but we traded Levine, we traded Vooch, we traded White. Actually, I don't. Yeah, and we ended up trading Dosunmu too.
I haven't heard much about White and Dosunmu. You can see the case for it, because they're going to be free agents who are difficult to extend ahead of time, right? So you have to kind of go through this thing with them as bird rights free agents, where they're out there in the market and you have no matching capability. So it would be a logical decision, but I'm just not sure if it's a Chicago Bulls decision.
Well, and also just because they make little enough that some of these teams that are so taxed out could acquire them in a way that they couldn't, say, a Zach LaVine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another one here that got my attention. So I talked about Milwaukee going after Butler, but the other route they could take, as you have here, is them getting Brandon Ingram. And that would, one way or another, I think they realize they need one more guy. So I wouldn't be shocked to see the Bucks in on both of them, and then figure out which trade is the one that works best for them. But I think Milwaukee is going to be active. I think they're just at that point. I'm trying to see what else you got. D'Angelo Russell is an underrated one that I think has been mentioned enough, because he's like, I think playing in LA, people tended to hone in on his weaknesses, but he can really shoot, and he's a pretty good secondary shot creator. Like, he helps a lot of teams. Like, this trade you did with him to going to Orlando, I think is really interesting. I think if Orlando can't get guys kind of at the top of their list, D'Lo becomes a really interesting guy for them.
Yeah, it seems like the Nets are only going to want expirings back. There aren't that many expirings around. And D'Lo, like the Magic are in a circumstance, because their stars are still pretty cheap, where, yeah, the fact that Russell is making $18 million this year isn't the end of the world. This deal was Russell to the Magic for Jet Howard and Gary Harris. So, and the Magic have plenty of room under the tax to do that. I mean, that was the other thing that made this year so hard, is just you're dealing with these two teams that are both within like $304 of the tax, like or $304 the apron. But the Magic were a team that didn't have that. Like, if you're actually not that close to the tax or the apron, like, the trade matching rules are quite liberal. You could get a
Oh
lot done.
yeah,
It's just
yeah,
these
absolutely,
teams are
right?
all completely taxed out
Yeah,
right now.
yeah.
Um,
Um, there's the other interesting thing here. So you have the Suns doing a trade with Portland for Robert Williams. I mean, we haven't really talked about Phoenix, trading their dollar for 3/4 in order to have some trade flexibility. Robert Williams is a guy I've heard is Portland's going to hang on to, but the general idea of trading that Nurkic deal, like I do think something is likely to happen there. I mean, Phoenix didn't make this deal because they valued those 3 picks for themselves more. Like they're trying
no.
to be able to do 2 different trades at the same time, basically. So one would likely involve Nurkic. You wouldn't be shocked if the other one was maybe Grayson Allen going out and getting them something back. Because again, they have to take back less money than they send out. They can't aggregate, but there are still players they could target.
I mean, Grayson Allen is not like the greatest salary. Neither is Nurkic. How much are you really getting back?
Yeah, I mean,
For
Nurkic is straight up dead money.
like,
Like you got to send out two
yeah,
firsts with him, I think.
yeah, and maybe you get something decent back, but I don't think it's like a quality starter. That's probably asking for a lot in that circumstance. Yeah, the Suns, the fact that they made that deal and the Butler Beal thing like wasn't like lined up and ready to go.
That's the part that
I
shocked me that they just did that
yeah,
on spec. Because you never do that in a front office. Like you line up the other things you want and then say, okay, what's it going to take to do this? And then you go, okay, now let's call Utah and say, hey, we need this for this deal and this for this deal. Let's play ball. And for them to not have that, wow.
well, we'll see what they end up doing. I mean, they could have just made the assessment of like, yeah, maybe this helps us with Butler, but we have some other stuff we could work on too. So it's worth doing either way. But that was surprising. I mean, that really felt like it was going to be a precursor. But obviously, the Beal component with the no trade and also the Noah trade, he's got both of those actually. Is what kind of made things
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, another thing that really stuck out to me is just Milwaukee. Yes, they can get under the second apron by shedding about $6 million. That has to be constant, but just Milwaukee has few enough assets just to acquire the player, not to mention also having to just foist $9 million for not only this year but next year onto another team.
Yeah.
Like that's you run out of stuff to entice people to actually trade you something and then also take on this extra money, particularly for next year.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where it gets really hard for them. I do think your mock trade deadline had Connaughton going to Toronto. I do think Toronto is definitely open for business with that 10
Yeah.
million in float they have below the tax line. They haven't used their non-taxpayer MLE, so they can take a player into that.
Yeah, do you think there's any way the Jazz would make Walker Kessler available?
I think it's kind of the classic Danny Ainge. If he can beat somebody
Yeah.
over the head badly enough in a trade, then he'd be open to it.
But like so the deal that I had going to the Lakers eventually as Utah, which I actually felt ultimately I didn't get enough as I thought about it more, was unprotected 2028 Lakers Utah swap and taking the 1-4 protection off their 2027 pick that they already owe them. And then you don't have to take back much in terms of salary either. I mean, that's the beauty of Kessler is like you basically any of these teams can trade for him, right? Like I actually I mean, the hilarious thing I would say, like what I ended up doing is I went to Danny, who was Phoenix, and I was like, hey, I'll trade Walker Kessler if you give me all 3 of the picks back that we just traded you.
Yes. That's definitely one that occurred to me. Which would be absolutely
because like
hilarious.
Kessler would make he would make the biggest difference on Phoenix for sure, and he doesn't make anything. So now, I mean, Utah got rid of those picks for a reason, which is that they have too many picks in those years already. But it's not like you can't just reflip those for something else.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe they
Exactly.
could get the Bucks unprotected 2031 pick for those 3 picks if once they get them back.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a funny trade because the Jazz would actually have to add salary. Um, it would be like
Yeah.
Kessler and Clarkson, I guess.
Well, they could just there's some low level guy they could trade for him, right? I mean, for Phoenix.
What do you mean?
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, I guess you're right. It would if you're it would have to be Allen or Nurkic. So you're included also. Yeah, because there's nobody else other than Nick Richards who they just acquired. And they probably
you
would
were
like to
suggesting
keep his
Nurkic not be in the deal. To me, it was like two problems with one.
Yeah.
Two birds with one stone kind of deal. You get off a Nurkic, and you get a starting center.
Angel asks in the chats, what did he say? He said, "Is Miles Turner available?"
I think that's more in fishing expedition territory, where if they could really, again, if they could, like, hilariously win a deal, I think I think they're open to conversation. But
they would have to get a center back.
Yeah, so I sort of don't expect him to be traded. The guy I've heard more about is Benedict Mathurin. So I'm interested to see what goes down there.
I've been waiting for that for a long time because he just doesn't fit into their salary structure. I mean, like, he still has some scoring ability, but he also doesn't really fit into the way that they play offense, moving the ball quickly. He's gotten a little better there. Like, he's got some decent defensive tools, but, like, Nembhard is just better than him. And especially if they want to hold on to Nembhard, they can't fit Mathurin into their salary structure. So, and I wouldn't want to I would want to move him before the bloom is completely off the road. I don't think he's that good. I think he's, like a bench scorer probably in the end in his development. Like, I don't know if he's a starter or if he is, like, because he's never going to be like a good enough passer or a good enough field guy to really be, like a great scoring option. He's only an okay shooter at the 2. So yeah, I would absolutely be trying to move him. And because how can they trade Turner? They can't trade Turner. Like, he's such a good fit with Siakam.
Yeah,
like, they're playing
especially
really
now
well.
that they're winning again. Like,
exactly.
I have a hard time seeing that one. But yeah, if they get like a solid first for Mathurin, I think they probably go ahead and do that. And then next year their financial situation with re-signing Turner becomes a little more open.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and also, like, you could probably dump Obi Toppin in the offseason if you needed to. I mean, now, if they end up not having the space to re-sign Turner because of Obi Toppin, that'll be ridiculous, obviously.
And the Nembhard extension.
Okay, but he's good, though. Like, that is a value contract. That's like...
Going 2 years, 56 for him is not a value contract by any construction of the definition.
He's the starting 2 who can also shift the backup 1. Like, how is that not worth $18 million? Like,
it's worth 18. It's not worth 28. That's my point. They already had him under contract. It was like they. Anyway.
Well, okay, but if he had gotten to restricted free agency this year, then he would have gotten a big offer sheet. I think that was the benefit that you got from doing that, was that he was going to get, there's a good chance he was going to get paid like a starter somewhere else. And so that was the quid pro quo, is like, we're going to pay you early. You're going to take probably less than your market value. Although I realize you didn't think it was less than a market value at the time. I know we disagree on that. I'm just trying to explain the thinking, but yeah, so I that's probably too far afield for this one. How do you think this Johnson thing, we can close on this, changes the Hawks thinking? Because they still don't have their pick.
Yeah.
They will at least make the play-in in the East if they unless they just no. Who's going to make it?
Chicago and Philadelphia would both have to pass them. I presume the resurgent Toronto Raptors are too far down the standings to realistically catch them. So it would have to be one of Chicago or Philly. But that's the interesting part of this is like, so you made the play in, then what? Like, you're going to lose, right? Like, I mean, I guess it's single
Yeah.
elimination. Uh, so I do think, like, I do wonder now if you're more open minded about trading Clint Capella, who's on an
Yeah,
expiring
that was
deal,
going to
and
be
it
my
was like,
question.
yeah, and it was like, what are we going to do the rest of the season if we trade him? And it's, well, if we're not looking great anyway, we can get by with a Kongwu and Nance. I think they'll listen to offers on Nance too. Although they could, like, he's still extension eligible. Like, they could go a few different ways on him. Um, and then I want, like, if they can get Bogdanovich playing better, I think they would listen on him. The problem is he's been so bad that I don't know if he has any trade value right now.
Well, maybe that's the reason to move him. Yeah, but he's almost 32 and a half right now, age-wise.
Yeah, I mean, he was so good last year. I thought he should have won the Sixth Man Award, and
Agreed.
this year just it has not been good.
Yeah. Well, you certainly the idea of them getting their pick back from San Antonio somehow. I mean that is a kind of a fascinating construction. That
Yes.
of Trey to Sacramento. And yeah, they have very similar contract structures. I guess that's just the next question. Like, is Trey even going to resign? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, I think Fox's value is certainly higher than Trey's around the league at the moment.
I would
But
I would
I
agree
don't,
with that.
yeah, but I don't know who the better player would be 4 years from now. I think it might be Trey, just because I think his
I just
passing and shooting age better.
well, I is what's happening this year a temporary thing because of his sore Achilles, or is it age? I mean, I think that's the big question. Because if he's really small and also can't really beat people one on one, then it's a problem, right?
No, I agree with you. But the Kings are in a difficult spot here. Uh, yeah, there's also Maz had this one too from the Kings' perspective, and this is something that I would do. Again, something I just don't think the Kings would be thinking of is that they should try to get something for Keon Ellis, who, like he could go to a team like the Celtics if the Celtics needed like one more body, which actually I think they kind of could, like to guard on
Oh
the
no,
perimeter
this the
now.
move for the Celtics is to do Springer for Ellis, and it saves them on
Yeah,
their tax bill. And then
yeah.
you get an asset from Boston. Yeah, like if the Kings are gonna, I don't. Again, the Kings aren't gonna take that step backwards. But yeah, there are a lot of contenders who could use Keon Ellis. I think, especially in his salary slot.
No, exactly. And they have Devin Carter. Like, you might as well use the rest of this season now to see what you have in him.
Yeah,
Like, they
really
drafted
evaluate
him
him.
into that role. Ellis is someone who could help a team, another team right now. Like, if you could get it like a late first for Ellis, I think that would be pretty good. But I just don't think they're going to go that route, which is like kind of funny because Ellis has been like in and out of the lineup. Like, he's one of those guys where I feel like his value would never be higher, even though I really like the player. But yeah, I mean that would be more along the lines of like a probably Boston's first this year type of,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Springer for Ellis. Like that would be the move. All right, this is fun. I guess we will talk next time with the entire trade deadline in the books. Have a good next 8 days or so. Drink some coffee.
Yes.
I will do the same, and we will talk to y'all next time. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone.